You're asking this bank to risk $8,000 on that. Grant Whitmore's voice carried farther than it needed to. The words traveled across the polished marble floor of Whitmore Community Bank, past the velvet queue ropes and quiet teller stations, reaching customers who suddenly found reasons to look toward counter 4. Ethan Miller stood perfectly still. "No, sir." Grant leaned back in his leather chair. "No, I'm asking you to read the application." For half a second, nothing moved except the ceiling fan turning lazily overhead. Ethan was 38, though the last 5 years had carved older lines around his eyes. His work jacket was clean but faded. A pale shadow of grease remained beneath one thumbnail despite 20 minutes of scrubbing that morning. On the desk sat everything he had brought to defend 11 years of honest work. Tax returns, garage receipts, bank statements, fleet contracts. Grant tapped the folder with one finger. "Mr. Miller, this isn't a charity desk." Someone behind Ethan shifted uncomfortably. He heard the faint clink of a woman setting down her coffee. He didn't turn around. "I didn't ask for charity," Ethan said quietly. "I asked for a chance." Grant gave a small laugh. Not cruel enough to cause a scene, just loud enough to make Ethan feel the scene forming around him. $8,000. That was all. Enough to replace the diagnostic system at Miller Auto Repair. Enough to protect 3 jobs. Enough to keep 11 years of his life from disappearing behind a closed sign. But Grant wasn't looking at the numbers anymore. He was looking at Ethan. At the worn jacket. At the inexpensive boots. At the old Ford pickup visible through the bank's glass entrance. Then Grant's eyes dropped to a photograph that had slipped halfway from the folder. A little blonde girl stood beside Ethan in front of the garage. Both had grease on their cheeks. Both were laughing. Beneath it was a child's drawing with 5 uneven words written in purple marker. "Don't let Daddy's shop close." Grant looked up. "Maybe your daughter needs stability more than you need a business." The fluorescent lights seemed to buzz louder. Ethan slowly picked up the photograph. "You can reject my loan." Grant folded his arms. "You don't get to judge my daughter." Grant's smile thinned. People in your situation sometimes need someone to tell them when to accept reality. Ethan slid the photograph back into the folder. No shouting, no threat, no begging. That was the strange thing about dignity. It rarely announced itself. Sometimes it simply stood there while humiliation exhausted itself. Grant pushed the folder toward him. "Application denied." Then a woman's voice came from directly behind Ethan. Calm, controlled, almost gentle. "Would you mind repeating that?" Grant looked up. Ethan turned. The woman appeared to be in her mid-30s, dressed simply in a cream blouse and dark trousers. No entourage, no visible security, no diamonds demanding attention, just clear blue-gray eyes fixed on Grant. "The part about people in his situation," she said. Grant frowned. "This is a private banking matter, ma'am." "Then perhaps you shouldn't have discussed it loudly enough for the entire lobby to hear." Silence. Grant straightened. "And who exactly are you?" The woman didn't answer. "Not yet. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and second chances, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here." Because Ethan Miller had walked into that bank believing he needed $8,000 to save his garage. He had no idea that the quiet woman behind him was there for an entirely different reason. And he certainly had no idea who she was. 72 hours earlier, Ethan had been standing beneath the raised hood of a silver Chevrolet when his entire week changed with one sound. Click. Then silence. Ethan stared at the diagnostic screen beside him. No, he pressed the power button again. Nothing. Come on. Another click. Nothing. The garage smelled of motor oil, hot rubber, and burnt coffee. An old radio murmured from the office, nearly drowned out by an impact wrench across the shop. Ethan unplugged the diagnostic unit, waited, and tried again. The screen flickered blue. For one hopeful second, numbers appeared. Then everything went black. "Tell me that's not what I think it is." Ethan looked over his shoulder. Marcus Reed, his oldest mechanic, stood several feet away holding a wrench. "It's dead." Marcus exhaled. "Can we repair it?" Ethan already knew the answer. Not this time. The machine was old. Too old. They had replaced cables, boards, connectors, anything that could buy another month. But some things eventually stopped asking to be repaired. They simply stopped. Without that system, Miller Auto Repair couldn't properly diagnose most newer vehicles. 2 fleet contracts depended on it. Losing those contracts meant losing nearly half the garage's monthly revenue. Marcus glanced toward Daniel and Luis. You tell them yet? No, Ethan, I said no. His voice wasn't angry, just tired. Ethan looked around the garage he had owned for 11 years. 3 lifts, a dented red toolbox, a faded American flag near the office. Nothing impressive, but 3 men fed their families because those doors opened every morning. That evening, Ethan sat at his kitchen table beneath a yellow hanging lamp. Bills formed 3 careful stacks. Mortgage, payroll, business expenses. He moved numbers around until midnight. They refused to become kinder. A replacement diagnostic system would cost nearly $8,000. His savings could cover part of it, but using them would leave almost nothing for payroll or emergencies. So Ethan circled one option: small business equipment loan. Behind him, a floorboard creaked. Daddy. Sophie stood in the hallway wearing pink pajamas, her blonde hair tangled from sleep. What are you doing awake? I wanted water. Her eyes landed on the bills. Is something wrong with the shop? Ethan hesitated. Just grown-up stuff. Are we losing it? The question landed harder than any bill. Ethan pulled out the chair beside him. Come here. Sophie climbed into it. The garage needs a new machine. That's all. Is it expensive? A little. She disappeared down the hallway. Seconds later, she returned carrying a small glass jar decorated with faded star stickers. Coins and folded bills rattled inside. Birthday money. Allowance. Every dollar she had. Saved. She pushed it toward him. You can have mine. Ethan stared at the jar, then gently pushed it back. No, sweetheart. But you need it. That's your money. You need it more. Ethan crouched beside her. A father doesn't build his future by taking his child's. Sophie studied him. What if the bank says no? Ethan smiled, although something inside him tightened. Then I find another way. You always do. He looked toward the dark kitchen window. His reflection looked older than 38. I always try. Sophie wrapped both arms around his neck. Later, after she had gone back to bed, Ethan opened the application again. $8,000. Not enough to make him rich. Not enough to transform his life. Just enough to keep working. Just enough to protect 3 jobs. Just enough to keep one promise to a 9-year-old girl. Beside his paperwork was a drawing Sophie had quietly left behind. It showed the garage beneath a bright yellow sun, Ethan standing outside with a wrench in his hand. Across the top she had written, "Don't let Daddy's shop close." Ethan folded it carefully and placed it inside the loan folder. 3 mornings later, that innocent drawing would fall onto a polished bank desk, and a stranger would learn exactly what kind of man was sitting across from her bank manager. By 9:15 Monday morning, Ethan had already decided he hated how clean the bank smelled. Everything inside Whitmore Community Bank seemed designed to remind people that money belonged in places like this. Polished marble, dark walnut counters, soft gray chairs without a single stain. Even the air smelled faintly of leather and expensive coffee. Mr. Miller? Ethan looked up. Grant Whitmore stood beside a glass-walled office, one hand extended. Grant Whitmore, Senior Lending Manager. Ethan. Their handshake lasted barely a second. At first, everything sounded professional. How long have you owned Miller Auto Repair? 11 years. Current employees? 3. Purpose of the loan? Replacement diagnostic equipment. Amount? $8,000. Outstanding business debt? None. That made Grant pause. Ethan slid his folder forward. I brought tax returns. Monthly revenue, fleet contracts, repair invoices. Everything your website requested. Very thorough. For a moment, Ethan allowed himself to breathe. Then Grant reached the section marked personal information. His eyes slowed. Widowed? Yes. Single income household? Yes. No co-borrower? No. The tone changed so slightly another man might have missed it. Ethan didn't. Grant leaned back. And your primary collateral is business equipment? And the business assets, which appear limited. The shop makes money. Grant glanced through the glass wall toward the parking lot. His eyes found Ethan's faded Ford, then returned to the application. Your cash reserves are thin. I had medical expenses after my wife died. Grant clicked his pen. And now you're raising a child alone. I am. That limits your financial flexibility. Ethan's shoulders stiffened. My daughter isn't a liability. I didn't say she was. You didn't have to. Outside the office, the woman in the cream blouse had stepped into line. Claire Harrington carried no briefcase, only a slim leather folder and a paper coffee cup. She wasn't there to make a deposit. Harrington Capital had completed its acquisition of a controlling stake in Whitmore Community Bank 3 days earlier, and Claire had spent the weekend reviewing branch performance, customer complaints, and small business lending standards. Monday morning was an unannounced visit. No executive welcome. No prepared presentation. She wanted to see how ordinary customers were treated when employees didn't know the new chairwoman was watching. Her attention drifted toward Grant's office. No significant investments? Grant asked. No secondary property? No guarantor? No. Grant closed the folder. He had not read the cash flow projections. He had not examined the fleet contracts. He had not reached the page showing 11 years without a missed business payment. Ethan noticed. Could you look at page 14? Grant's fingers stopped. What's on page 14? My numbers. Ethan pushed the folder gently toward him. The garage isn't failing. One machine failed. There's a difference. Grant smiled. Mr. Miller. Lending decisions involve more than optimism. Good. Ethan leaned forward. Then used the facts. Through the glass, Claire lowered her coffee. Grant opened the folder again, but not to page 14. He studied Ethan's address, his occupation, his available balance. Then his eyes moved once more toward the old Ford outside. Claire saw it happen. Not a calculation. A judgment. The man behind the desk had stopped evaluating a loan. He had begun evaluating the person asking for it. No cosigner? No significant collateral? Not beyond the business. Grant rested his pen against the application. And you expect this bank to gamble $8,000 on a garage? Ethan didn't answer immediately. Phones rang softly outside. A printer hummed behind the teller stations. Cold air moved through brass vents. I expect you to read the numbers. Grant's eyebrows lifted. I have read enough. No, sir. You've read about me. A pause. You haven't read about the business. Claire moved closer. Grant opened the folder with visible impatience. 3 employees? Yes. 3 full-time salaries? Yes. Health benefits? What I can afford. Grant gave a quiet chuckle. There's your first problem. Ethan frowned. Excuse me. You're emotionally attached to an inefficient business model. They have families. They're employees. They're both. Grant shook his head. You're running a small repair shop like it's a corporation. Marcus had worked beside Ethan for 9 years. Daniel had a newborn son. Luis helped support his mother. Grant saw payroll. Ethan saw dinner tables. If the machine isn't replaced, Grant continued, you lose contracts. Yes. And if you lose contracts, revenue drops. And then, the shop could close. Grant leaned back. There it is. Ethan slid the folder forward. Page 14. Grant sighed. Mr. Miller, page 14. Something in Ethan's quietness made him open it. Projected revenue. Existing fleet agreements. Payment history. Equipment replacement estimates. Grant scanned the page for perhaps 4 seconds, then closed it. That's it. Ethan asked. I understand the picture. You looked at 4 lines. I've been approving loans for 16 years. And I've been repairing cars for 11. Grant's mouth tightened. This isn't a garage. No, Ethan held his gaze. That's why I'm not telling you how to fix a transmission. Silence. A teller looked down quickly to hide a smile. Grant noticed. His cheeks colored. Claire did not smile. She understood what had changed. This was no longer only about $8,000. Grant felt challenged. And people who confused authority with respect often became cruelest when someone refused to fear them. Grant straightened the papers. Your liquidity is weak. My payment history isn't. Your collateral is limited. My contracts aren't. You're a single-income household with a dependent child. That doesn't tell you whether the garage can repay $8,000. Grant's pen clicked. Once, twice, 3 times. Claire knew the bank's policy. She had reviewed it herself during the acquisition. Nothing Grant had mentioned automatically disqualified Ethan. Not one thing. Yet she remained silent. For now. Because she needed to know whether Grant was merely careless, or whether he was willing to ignore his own bank standards to make a struggling father feel small. The real world doesn't care how hard you work, Mr. Miller. Grant pushed the folder across the desk. It cares whether you can pay. Ethan looked at him. So do I. Apparently not enough. Ethan glanced at page 14. You have 11 years of payment history. I've seen it. You have my contracts. I've seen those too. Then what exactly am I missing? Grant folded his hands. Security. The bank seemed colder now. Sometimes responsibility means recognizing when something has run its course. The garage hasn't. You just told me it could close. If I can't replace one machine. Exactly. Ethan reached for the folder. Thank you for your time. Grant seemed almost disappointed that he wasn't going to argue. Then the folder caught against his wrist. Several papers slid free. A photograph fluttered downward. So did Sophie's drawing. Grant picked up the photograph. That your daughter? Ethan extended his hand. Yes. Grant looked at the purple letters. Don't let Daddy's shop close. Well, he placed the photograph on the desk. Maybe your daughter needs stability more than you need a business. Ethan stopped moving. The printer outside went silent. A teller looked up. Claire's eyes narrowed. Children need security, Grant continued. Perhaps being responsible means admitting you can't give her the life she needs by holding on to a failing garage. Ethan slowly picked up Sophie's photograph. He brushed one thumb across the corner. When he looked up, there was no embarrassment in his eyes. Only something steady. You can say no to my loan. Grant opened his mouth. Ethan didn't let him interrupt. You don't get to use my daughter to make yourself feel taller. Silence. I'm judging risk, Mr. Miller. No, Ethan slid the photograph safely into the folder. You stopped judging the loan 10 minutes ago. Grant's face reddened. Careful. Ethan stood. He was not richer because he rose. He was not suddenly powerful. But dignity has a strange way of changing the size of a room. I came here asking for $8,000, Ethan said quietly. Not permission to be a father. Grant shoved the remaining papers toward him. Application denied. Ethan gathered them. No begging. No threat. No insult returned. He simply closed the folder. Then Claire stepped forward. Would you mind repeating that? Grant looked past Ethan. The part about people in his situation, Claire said. Ma'am, this is none of your business. Claire placed her coffee on the counter. Actually, it is. Grant stared at her. Whatever you think you heard, I heard enough. Claire stepped beside Ethan. What exactly disqualified him? That information is confidential. Ask his permission. Grant looked at Ethan. Ethan hesitated. You have it. Claire waited. Grant cleared his throat. Insufficient liquidity. Limited collateral. Elevated household exposure. 3 reasons. Among others. Does your small business equipment program require a co-signer when documented cash flow meets the repayment threshold? Grant's expression shifted. Not necessarily. Does it require real estate collateral for an $8,000 equipment loan? No. But, does being a single parent automatically disqualify a commercial borrower? Grant stopped. No, 3 questions. 3 answers. Claire lowered her hand. Did you review page 14? Grant's jaw tightened. I reviewed the application. That wasn't my question. The silence afterward was clean and sharp. Grant stood. I don't appreciate being interrogated in my own branch. Then don't make decisions you can't explain. A few customers had stopped pretending not to listen. Grant's embarrassment hardened into anger. Who exactly are you? Claire reached into her leather folder. She removed a simple white card and placed it on the desk. Claire Harrington, Chairwoman, Harrington Capital Group. Grant's face emptied. Ethan saw the change before he understood the name. Grant understood immediately. The acquisition announcement had reached management that morning. Ms. Harrington, his voice was different now. Softer. Smaller. Claire looked toward the bank logo behind him. My company acquired the controlling stake in this bank. Grant swallowed. I wasn't aware you were visiting today. That was the point. He glanced at Ethan. I can approve Mr. Miller's application immediately. Claire didn't move. No, Grant froze. I'm sorry. I didn't ask you to approve his loan. Even Ethan looked surprised. If he qualifies, he gets the loan, Claire said. If he doesn't, he doesn't. Grant nodded quickly. Of course. But now we're going to find out which one is true. Claire turned toward Ethan. Mr. Miller, will you allow another lending officer to review your application from the beginning? You're not asking them to do me a favor? No, then yes. Claire nodded. That's all I wanted. Minutes earlier, Grant had held all the power in the room. Now the billionaire before him had refused to use hers to buy Ethan an advantage. She had demanded something far more uncomfortable. The truth. Run it again. Rebecca Lawson, a second lending officer, studied the monitor in a private conference room. I already did. And? Claire asked. Rebecca turned the screen slightly. His application qualifies for approval. Silence. Ethan sat 3 chairs away, hands folded over. His worn folder. Rebecca clicked through another screen. 11 years in business. No prior business loan defaults. No late equipment payments in 7 years. Existing fleet contracts support projected revenue. Debt service coverage passes. Grant shifted. The liquidity ratio is within program tolerance. The collateral? This product doesn't require full collateralization at $8,000. Ethan looked down. For 3 days, he had wondered whether he was asking for too much. Now the numbers were answering for him. Rebecca frowned. That's strange. Claire turned. What? There was a preliminary system recommendation at 8:42 this morning. Eligible for manual underwriting review. And after that, Rebecca hesitated. A manager override. No one needed to ask whose credentials appeared beside it. Grant Whitmore. Claire looked at him. Was the override based on his repayment history? No, his contracts. No, his debt coverage? Grant stared at the desk. No, 3 questions. 3 answers. Claire let silence finish what anger could not. Grant finally looked toward Ethan. Mr. Miller, I misjudged the application. Ethan placed page 14 on the table. Then learn why. Rebecca broke the silence. Mr. Miller, based on verified income and current business performance, I'm approving the $8,000 equipment loan. Ethan didn't move. Because she owns the bank. Rebecca shook her head. Because you qualify. Something loosened behind Ethan's ribs. Not triumph. Relief. He thought of Marcus beside the dead diagnostic machine. Daniel's newborn son. Louise helping his mother. Sophie pushing her savings jar across the kitchen table. You're sure? Rebecca smiled. The numbers are sure. Grant looked toward Claire. What happens to me? You'll be removed from lending decisions while we review recent denials. Grant swallowed. Am I fired? No, he looked surprised. If this was ignorance, you can learn, Claire said. Then her eyes hardened. If it was character, your next choices will tell us. Ethan picked up his folder. He could have demanded Grant's job. He could have enjoyed watching him fall. He didn't. Because justice was never supposed to become revenge simply because power changed hands. 3 days later, Claire Harrington stood beneath the open door of Miller Auto Repair, holding 2 coffees. Ethan looked at her. You came all the way out here to check whether I spent your $8,000. It isn't my $8,000. No. You borrowed it. And I plan to pay it back. I know. The new diagnostic system glowed against the far wall. An impact wrench rattled nearby. Classic rock played quietly from an old radio. The garage was alive again. Claire stepped inside. No driver. No security. No executive suit. Just jeans, a pale blue blouse, and coffee. An elderly woman appeared beside an aging Buick. Ethan. Mrs. Patterson. What happened? Check engine light again. Keys. She handed them over. I can't pay until next month. Ethan opened the driver's door. I didn't ask. 20 minutes later, he replaced a cracked hose and cleared the warning code. Mrs. Patterson tried to hand him $30. Ethan closed her fingers around the bills. Buy groceries. Her eyes filled. You can't keep doing this. Probably not. She hugged him anyway. Claire watched the Buick disappear down the road. You just borrowed money to save your business. Correct. And you're repairing cars for free. Not cars. Ethan picked up his wrench. People. From the office came a small voice. Daddy. Sophie appeared carrying a workbook. She stopped when she saw Claire. You're the bank lady. Claire laughed. I suppose I am. Did you give Daddy the loan? No, good. Claire blinked. Good. Daddy said he earned it. Ethan suddenly became very interested in organizing sockets. Claire smiled. He did. Later, Claire leaned against the workbench. My father was 26 when he asked for his first business loan. Ethan glanced at her. He was rejected. Before Harrington Capital. Before anyone returned his calls. What happened? One banker finally read his business plan. Ethan understood. That's why you stepped in. Partly. And the other part? Claire looked toward Sophie. My husband died 4 years ago. Ethan's expression softened. I'm sorry. So am I. My wife's been gone. 5. No dramatic confession followed. Just 2 people who understood that grief did not disappear simply because life remained busy. Claire looked around the garage. I could invest here. Ethan looked at her. Claire, I'm serious. New lifts. Expansion. More staff. You wouldn't have to worry about $8,000 loans again. Ethan set down his wrench. I'll take coffee from you. Claire waited. I won't take charity. It wouldn't be charity. Then let me earn the next conversation too. For a moment, Claire said nothing. Then she smiled. Not because he had rejected her money. Because he had treated her exactly as he wanted the bank to treat him. Fairly. Without fear. Without worship. Without letting wealth decide the value of the person standing in front of him. 6 months later, Sophie stood beneath the garage door staring at a crowd gathered outside. Daddy, why are there so many people here? Ethan smiled. I was hoping you knew. The new diagnostic system had already paid for itself twice over. 2 additional fleet contracts had come in. Marcus, Daniel, and Louise were still working. Ethan had made every loan payment early. Nothing miraculous had happened. He had simply been given a fair chance. A black sedan pulled into the lot. Claire stepped out carrying 2 coffees. Sophie grinned. The bank lady. Claire laughed. I'm never escaping that name, am I? Nope. Inside the garage, a small television had been set up beside the office. Second Chance Small Business Initiative. Claire's company was announcing a new lending program requiring participating branches to evaluate small business applicants through documented repayment ability, cash flow, and business performance before discretionary overrides could be accepted. Ethan looked at Claire. You did all this because of one loan? No, she shook her head. Because yours wasn't the only one. The review had uncovered other applicants whose files had been dismissed too quickly. A landscaper, a widowed bakery owner, a young mechanic. People with numbers worth reading, but appearances easy to judge. A familiar voice came from behind them. Mr. Miller? Ethan turned. Grant Whitmore stood near the entrance. No expensive jacket. No polished confidence. Just a man holding an envelope. Grant had spent months away from lending decisions, completing retraining while auditors reviewed his previous applications. He had recently returned in a junior small business advisory role. I wanted to give you this. Ethan opened the envelope. Inside was confirmation that his next scheduled payment had been received. You drove here for a receipt? Grant almost smiled. No, he glanced toward Sophie. Then back at Ethan. I came because I owed you something that couldn't fit in an email. The garage quieted. I was wrong about you. Ethan studied him. Grant swallowed. And worse, I thought having authority meant my judgment didn't need questioning. Ethan folded the receipt. He could have reminded Grant of every word. He could have made him feel small. Instead, he extended his hand. Then be right about the next person. Grant stared at the hand before taking it. That was redemption. Not forgetting what happened. Not pretending cruelty didn't matter. But refusing to become cruel when life finally gave you the advantage. By sunset, the crowd was gone. The garage glowed amber beneath the evening sky. Sophie sat on the hood of Ethan's Ford eating ice cream while Claire leaned beside him. Above the office door hung a handmade sign Sophie had painted. Everybody deserves a chance. Claire looked at it. She spelled everything correctly. Big year. Sophie called out. Claire. Yes. Were you really the richest person in the bank that day? Claire glanced at Ethan. Then she smiled. No, Sophie frowned. Who was? Claire looked toward Ethan's worn workbench. At the photograph of his late wife. At 3 employee time cards hanging on the wall. At the little glass savings jar Sophie had once offered her father. Then back at the man who had walked into a bank with almost nothing except honest numbers and quiet dignity. I wasn't, Claire repeated softly. Sophie still looked confused. Ethan didn't. Outside, evening traffic whispered along the road. A wrench clinked against concrete. The old radio played quietly. No limousine arrived. No $1 million check appeared. No one applauded. Because Ethan Miller had never asked for a miracle. He had asked for $8,000. He had asked to be judged by his work instead of his clothes. He had asked for one fair chance. And sometimes justice doesn't need to shout. Sometimes grace doesn't arrive like thunder. Sometimes it is simply one person willing to speak when everyone else stays quiet, and another who refuses to surrender his dignity while waiting for the truth to be heard. Money had changed hands that morning at the bank. But respect had changed something far greater. And in the end, the richest person in the room had never been the one who owned it. It was the man who had so little and still refused to let bitterness own him.